Hello, everybody. Paul here. Just want to talk to you a little bit about our ongoing series that we're having here at Lakeshore called Pursuing His Presence. And Pastor Chris began this series last Sunday with a message entitled His Calling. And there's a devotion book that goes along with this series that you may pick up at the church if you haven't already got one, or if you haven't started the devotions, you may go to the website, lakeshorebaptist.com, and download the series for yourself to use. Last week we talked about the calling, and we are all called to do certain things. This series looks at the book of Exodus and the life of Moses. God called Moses to do a specific thing for him, which was to go to Pharaoh and plead on behalf of the Israelite people to let them go so that they may worship God freely. Eventually, that would be let them go to the promised land. This week, we're talking about authority. Moses and Aaron. Aaron is Moses' spokesperson because, Moses decided that he wasn't qualified, good enough to be the spokesperson to go to the Pharaoh. So God said, take Aaron, stop making excuses. Let's get the job done. So Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and plead on behalf of the people to let them go. Moses tells Aaron what to say. God tells Moses what to do. And God has told Moses that if the Pharaoh does not listen, that plagues will be imposed upon the Egyptians. So Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and sure enough, Pharaoh says, nope, not having it. So God says, all right, Moses, stretch out your hand. And certain plagues would happen, which have an impact on the Egyptian people. And it was interesting to note that it didn't happen for the Israelites. And I'm sure the Egyptians noticed that their slaves, the Israelites, were not being impacted by these plagues. And I'm sure that didn't set well with them. So the Pharaoh would realize that this is a really catastrophic event going on here. And he would go to Moses and say, I'm sorry, I have sinned against your God and against you. Please pray to your God to stop these plagues. So Moses would go and pray to God and say, I think Pharaoh is coming around. So God would stop the plagues. And Moses and Aaron would go back to the Pharaoh and say, all right, let's let the people go. And Pharaoh would start going, well, maybe I'll let some of the people go. And Moses says, no, it's all or nothing. We need all the people, men, women, children, all the livestock, everything. We need to go. And Pharaoh said, no way, Jose. He realizes that if he lets the Israelites go, that there goes all his free labor. So he says, well, no, I think I was just kidding. Not going to let him go. He was not recognizing at all the fact that God has authority over everything. God has authority over even the things that the Egyptians were doing. So Moses is kind of dumbfounded. He said, all right, God, I've told Pharaoh what you said. God says, all right, more plagues are coming. And finally, Pharaoh, I think, gets frustrated with the fact that things are not going well for the Egyptian people. And he pleads again to Moses, ask your God to stop these plagues, and I'll let the people go. And in chapter 11 of Exodus, the last plague to come would be the death of every firstborn son. Now imagine losing your son over something that you had control of. And I think this spoke to Pharaoh finally to let the people go. So what can we learn in response to all this? Sometimes people make promises to God that they have no intentions to follow through with, so they would be relieved of some physical or emotional event. And I think that's where Pharaoh was. Pharaoh saw what was going on and he said, I've got to get myself and my people out of this mess. So he makes a deal with God. Sometimes that's not a bad thing, but in my opinion, that does not ever work out well. If you're not sincere with your request to God, God is not going to really hear you or believe you. Pharaoh caused unnecessary suffering for his own people because he refused to listen to God. He refused to see God was in control of all things. So let me challenge you that when you face things that are not going well in your life, turn to the Lord. But also turn to the Lord when things are going well. Ask him to bless you. And then remember to thank him and seek him when you're making decisions, big and small. There is nothing, there is no one who has the power and authority to oversee everything in the world except God Almighty. And on Friday's devotion, we were also to read Psalm chapter 24. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty. We are not to question his will. We are to listen to what he says and obey him at all times. So let me encourage you this week to take a look at God's authority. What authority are you allowing him to have on your life? I hope that this has been a blessing for you. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.